Well, Kyle, welcome. It's good that we're able to take this time. Um, so here we are. It's July 10th, 2020. 7 months ago, no, maybe before that.
Yeah.
Yes, we were talking about, man, we'd love to have you on board. We've been praying for years.
Yes, sir.
That I felt in my heart that we needed to go cross-culture in our ministry, not to be politically correct. I felt that God wanted to expand our mindset, expand our functioning, and also expand our reach. And so when I heard about you and checked the references, I mean, you must have paid folks well because you were highly recommended. And we met in Manhattan,
Yes, sir.
talked about the possibility of you coming on board, and like a soldier, you embraced the invitation. And so you came on board in January of this year. So kind of help us, you and I have we spent time, help us to kind of get your story, how you got to New York, and how you felt in your heart that this could be an assignment that you could grow in, as well as could be a blessing to the church.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me, and super excited to be here. So basically, my story starts in East Tennessee. In 1988, I was born in an anti-abortion program, and immediately placed into the Smoky Mountain Children's Home. Back then, it was called the Church of God Children's Home. And rough childhood, a lot of things happened, a lot of bad things through middle school and early high school years. I just kind of hated God, hated Christians, hated Christianity. And 15 years old, I was forced to go on a mission trip. And that mission trip happened to be to New York City.
Wow.
Yeah, and God really used that trip to reveal himself to me. And that was one of the things that I'm most grateful for now, looking back, is that I literally found a real, honest relationship with Jesus Christ in New York City, which is one of the greatest cities in the world, for me.
So wait, so you grew up in a relatively small town.
Yes, sir.
In a godly environment.
Yeah.
The Bible Belt,
Right.
basically. And you needed to come to New York City for your faith to become alive.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I love talking about now is like, I'm not a Christian because of my Christian upbringing. I'm a Christian in spite of it.
That's awesome. That's
And
awesome.
Jesus literally saved me from the church in a lot of ways. And not to speak bad about the church or anything, but my church experience was a lot of politics and a lot of stuff.
I mean, you're a PK.
Yeah, pastor's kid.
So you're right there in the parsonage. You probably saw stuff most people didn't see.
Exactly.
And felt the pain and the struggles of
Right,
that.
yeah, and that's one thing that I just loved about New York City, because it was different than Tennessee. I feel like being, my faith really blossoms outside of the Christian bubble. And when I'm inside of the Christian bubble, I kind of feel restricted a little bit, and I'm not really as mobile as I need to be.
Kind of talk a little bit more about that, because I think that's quite insightful. Because when you're in the Christian bubble, everyone understands the expectation.
Yes, sir.
So we kind of move in that.
Right.
And so to be on the outside of that,
Yeah.
now you're talking about secular now.
Yeah.
Where you have to engage people who didn't have the background that you
Yeah.
had. And somehow you feel much more fulfilled in that setting.
Yeah, I mean, to, I guess, put it plainly, is the one thing I love about being a Christian in New York City is because I feel like being a Christian in New York City makes me like a minority. And in Tennessee, everybody was a Christian because it was like my great-granddad was a Christian, granddad was a Christian. Like the outreach that you do in Christianity in Tennessee is saying just because, your grandparents are Christians doesn't mean you're a Christian. That's the outreach. Up here, it is, I feel like my faith and the church is really alive in New York City because we have to be.
Mm-hmm. And so that is such a major shift. You're coming from the Bible Belt, where church becomes the way of life. You're exposed to different kinds of stuff. And then you come to New York City and found that your faith blossomed, but also that you fell in love with the city.
Oh, yeah.
Doing
Love
ministry
it.
in the city.
Yeah. So growing up in Sevier County, Tennessee, pretty much everybody looks like me, sounds like me, talks like me. They are me, And our claim to fame in my county it's the birthplace of Dolly Parton. That's pretty much what everybody knows about East Tennessee. And I just felt like I didn't understand perspective.
Okay.
And I didn't know that I didn't know perspective until I kind of got outside of that box. And when I got to New York City on my mission trip, and then over the years, I've been coming back every year to lead mission trips, the world is so much bigger than East Tennessee, and it's so much bigger than my little perspective in East Tennessee.
So for folks who probably saw you growing up back in Sevierville,
Yeah.
just a church boy, pastor's kid, how have you changed since coming to New York City?
Oh, man. I guess what I would say is,
Or how has the shift changed your thinking, your functioning?
So I love to say that, like, I am just all about loving others and community service and outreach, and just literally trying to be what Jesus did. And like, Jesus didn't hang out with who we thought he should hang out with. He didn't go where we thought he should go. And I kind of love following that mold. And I feel like I'm downing Southern Christians, but I'm not, because I love my background because it made me who I am. But sometimes when we have a singular perspective, we miss the entirety of the world around us. And that's one thing I'm thankful for here.
And isn't it amazing, because there is a much bigger world.
Yeah.
And I can think of the same way, because I was born in a small country, Jamaica.
Yeah.
And so when you're in this bubble, your identity becomes shaped by that. And then moving out to Europe and different countries, I discovered a lot of assumptions that I had in Jamaica didn't make sense once you move outside.
Yeah.
And that is such a powerful experience. So here we are. We met, we talked. I felt, and this is something that we've always felt, that God was calling us to step out of the bubble. Because even in New York City, you can settle in your bubble as well.
Yeah.
You could settle in your racial bubble or your national bubble. So our church, for example, this year we celebrate 50 years. This church was started by Jamaican immigrants. And over the years, while we have grown to involve probably 20-something different nationalities, we would still be considered a visible minority congregation.
Yeah.
And while there's so many other racial groups in New York City. So even though we're here in New York, it is still possible, if we're not careful, to still stay within our own bubble.
Exactly.
And I believe God has been calling us for years to step out of that bubble, but we needed people who understood that kind of creative model, and that's where you came on. And so you came on in January.
Yeah.
We talked about, we established Urban Reach. You want to talk a little bit about Urban Reach?
Yeah, so basically, my heart, you talk to people that knew me in my early 20s and, late teenage and college years. I would tell anybody that would listen to me, they're like, hey, what do you want to do when you grow up? I was like, I want to live in New York City, and I want to help churches do outreach. That was like my answer. And little did I know that God was actually preparing me for that. It was almost like I was speaking that into life. And I came up to New York City in 2017, which is going on 3 years. This August will be 3 years in New York City. And I just always had the desire to help local churches because, mission trips are mission trips they're great. but it's for a short time. And, I brought over 8,000 people to New York City on mission trips from all around the
That's
country.
phenomenal.
So, which is great. But they're here for a week, they're here for 2 weeks, and then they leave and go home. And I wanted to stay in New York City and, teach them on a short-term basis what they can do back home, wherever they come from. But while I'm here, I want to really reinforce and help local churches in New York City either start outreach programs in their church, or if they're already doing an outreach program, help them improve it and just take it to the next level. So that's kind of where you came in.
Well, and you've been here now, what, 3 years?
Yeah.
And so when I heard about you, did some more background, you sound like you've been here like 20 years. I mean, you have established contacts that I'm like, how did God know these folks? It's almost like you came to New York on a mission.
Yeah.
Most people come to New York City and they're fascinated with the attractions, the tourism. You came literally as a missionary to New York City.
Yeah, so like I said, my first mission trip, my first time ever to New York City was when I was 15 years old, and I was a trip taker on that trip. But when I was 20 years old, I started leading mission trips. And for the past 10 years, I would come up either 1 week in June or 1 week in July for 10 years and lead a ton of people on missions. So although I've lived here, I've only lived here for 3 years, I've been coming here for about over 10 years. So like, I know the subway, a lot of times better than locals, because, for what I found is a lot of people here, they don't like to, leave their boroughs. When's the last time someone in Queens went to the Bronx or Brooklyn? I'm in every borough like every week, and I love it. So
you navigate not just the system, but your network, which is remarkable. Because that's why it is so dangerous to make assumptions. Because you're a young man from Sevierville.
Right.
We're talking about could sit in a little town in New York, and you come to New York City, and you just navigate the transportation, but you also have built relationships across different cultural areas. That's phenomenal.
Yeah, and that's one of the things they're just part of, when you lead a mission trip to New York City, you have to program the entire week out, and that just comes after building relationships week after week, month after month, year after year, where, I have a group of 20 to 40, teenagers from South Carolina, Alabama, Tennessee, and I have to program a missions. So I just start calling people. And, you kind of start cold calling people at first. It's the Bowery Mission Soup Kitchen. It's some NYC food bank. It's this church block party. And it just starts like that. But then after a year or two, it's a good experience for that church or that ministry or that soup kitchen. They're like, hey, when you come back, use this again. And then you just start building relationships. So after 10 years of planning and organizing mission trips, your contact book kind of gets full.
No, that's remarkable. I've been living here now 17 years. But it amazes me the range and the diversity of your contacts.
Yeah. And that's one thing that was always our mission or our vision for our mission trip, is to expose people to a different way of doing ministry. Like when I first got saved on my mission trip, and I went back home and I'm like, okay, I've given my life to the Lord, like now what? And to me, and a lot of people kind of think this way, is they think if you want to be in ministry, that means you're a senior pastor, a youth pastor, or praise and worship leader.
That's true.
And that is just the furthest thing from the truth. There is millions of ways to do ministry. And so when I brought people up here for mission trips, I wanted to expose them not only to different cultures and a different way of life, but a different way to do ministry. So we had planned every single day differently, where one day they're doing children's ministry, the next day they're doing homeless ministry, the next day they're doing this, that, or the other, Muslim ministry, Jewish ministry, whatever. And we know that they're not going to like everything they do, but maybe they find their one skill set. Maybe they find their one passion, and then that's what they take back with them and go home and study. That's what they go to college for. That's what they get training for, and that's what they get degrees, and that's the career path and the ministry path they walk out. Is they came to New York City and they were exposed to 10 or 15 different ways to do ministry, but they found their one passion. They found their one skill set.
And I think maybe where we have made a mistake is that when someone says, I'm called to ministry,
Yeah.
we make the assumptions. You're either going to be pastor,
Right.
worship leader, something in the church building.
Right.
When in truth, there's such a wide range
Yeah.
of ministry opportunities.
Yeah, and that's like the culture that I grew up in as a kid and a teenager that I kind of rejected at an early age, even in my early walk, was most youth pastors make more youth pastors. And most pastors make more pastors.
So you reproduce who you are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And instead of, I think a leader, the best quality of a leader is to recopy himself, but to identify the skill sets and passions in the person that's following them and say, okay, you're gifted in this, you're skilled in this, you have a passion for this, so let's build on that.
And New York is the perfect landscape.
Exactly.
So when we talked, you came on board in January, and we established Urban Reach, which is a nonprofit, which
Right.
is now registered.
Yeah. The day quarantine started, we got our nonprofit status the day quarantine started.
So here, Urban Reach is a nonprofit which functions in partnership with the Church of God of East Flatbush. And so you're able now to help train churches
Right.
that are interested in whether receiving short-term
Right.
missionaries from the South, student missionaries, or folks who would like an exposure in urban ministry, that we would have dates which are available.
Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, it's my heart and our vision, I say for the both of us now, with Urban Reach New York City, is being, if you're a pastor that's watching this or listening to this, and you have a passion or vision to do outreach in your church, like just reach out to us. And it is literally my job now to try to make that happen. Or if you already have an outreach going and you just need a little help taking it to the next level, might need some resources, might need some financial help, reach out to me and see if we can help you out. And then also, if you're a person that's watching this and you're not in New York City, or you're not a pastor but you want to help pastors, you want to help the local church, contact us, and we can point you in the right direction for your financial blessings, your resource blessings, or your skill set as well.
And you know what I was thinking, which would also be great, just as how we have sister cities.
Right.
So, for example, New York could be a sister city
Right.
to another major city in another country.
Yeah.
That we could actually have churches in the South that could partner with congregations here in New York and can actually build an ongoing relationship.
Yeah, and it's kind of crazy that through the mission trips that I've been doing the past couple of years, is that's kind of happened organically.
Okay.
And now we can kind of formalize it a little
That's
bit.
super.
And shout out to Sister Faith Campbell at God's Love in Action in the Bronx. I've taken a few mission teams to her, and they've loved her. They've loved the church, and there's been some of my mission teams that their youth group have raised money to buy
support.
her like outreach stuff. I think they bought her like a tent for outreach stuff. I mean, it's great stuff. So, I'm just here in the city. I love New York City. I love God. I love helping people. So however you want to help people, I just want people to say, like, if they have a heart to do something in New York City, but they're not really quite sure what to do or how to do it, call me.
We'll help them navigate that. So here we are, 7 months into 2020.
Yeah.
So right after you came on board, right after we established Urban Reach, then we had COVID.
Yeah.
What was that like for you in terms of through your lens? How? Because I mean, we've never seen this before.
Right.
New York City, Times Square shut down because of a virus.
Yeah. So on a practical level, it affected me a lot because anybody that knows me, I love to go out to eat, and I love restaurants, and all the restaurants are closed. So like cooking for myself was definitely a new experience. But on a spiritual side, I think, going into 2020, I'm sure you might have, but most pastors I was hearing from, they were preparing their 2020 vision and their sermon series for 2020.
Look, man, it's a nice series.
Exactly. And I feel like the word that God has kind of put in my heart in this year with the virus, and we'll talk about it here in a little bit with the racial stuff, the the economics, everything that's happened, is God is using these events to expose people, and He's exposing you for what do you really lean on? What is your real support system? Is your support system the unadulterated gospel of Jesus Christ, or is it a political system, or is it an economic system, or is it a racial system? Like, what is your support system? So for me, like, I struggled with it because, like, I was like, man, I need community. I need a face-to-face interaction with people. So it literally forced me to read my Bible more, to actually pray. I couldn't remember before the virus happened. Like, I was really ashamed of it. Like, I couldn't remember the last time like I got on my knees and prayed, and listened to praise and worship music. And I'm like, my God, I'm actually a Christian now.
But it does force us though, because once the church doors are closed, now you have to really take ownership
exactly
for your spiritual growth. And of course, we're not even fully out of COVID-19 yet. And then we had George Floyd. We had the protests, several protests right here in New York City, and obviously the Black Lives Matter movement and all these racial events have been forcing the church to look at the issues of racism.
Exactly.
And many times we're uncomfortable dealing with the issue. We prefer to be kind of silent about it, but these events bring it to the fore. And so here you are. How does your experience living in New York City and seeing what you now see, how has Kyle's perspective on even race relations been impacted?
Yeah, so the George Floyd situation and the racial unrest and the protests and Black Lives Matter and all that kind of stuff has really allowed me to almost like get down on my knees and thank God that I have the perspective that I do. And what I mean by that is saying that, like, God has, and I'm looking back now in my life, and God has strategically placed people in my life that give me multiple perspectives.
Okay.
And I don't have just like I do have a Southern white guy perspective, but I also have other perspectives that my mentors have placed into me. Like, one of the guys that I've kind of placed myself under as a college and career group at an early age in my walk was a pastor, Leonce Crump Jr., who moved to Atlanta, and he is all about social injustice, and he is all about just true Christianity for everybody in the kingdom.
Because that was one of the things, of course.
Right.
So while our relationship has kind of grown closer as we work as partners, we have talked about the issues of social justice and so forth. And it was amazing for me to see how comfortable you were speaking to the issues of social justice.
Yeah, and that's one thing. And I mentioned Leonce's name. There's a ton of other people I could mention where, I grew up in a group home facility, the Smoky Mountain Children's Home, where there was kids from all walks of life. Growing up, I listened to hip hop music more than I'm from Tennessee, and I hate country music. I hate country music. So I've always kind of had that kind of perspective of I love hip hop. I worked in Christian hip hop for a couple of years as a road manager for a music label. I'm so thankful that no matter what table God puts me at, I'm comfortable talking and breaking bread with them, and not as I'm talking down at them or I'm ministering to them, but I'm literally sitting down with equal brothers and sisters in the faith. Because although we might be different nationalities and different races, we still have faith in Jesus Christ.
And I like the phrase you say, breaking bread, because I think when we look at the life of Christ and the way Christ did ministry, it is so different than how we do ministry today.
Yeah.
We do ministry in terms of speaking to the person.
Right.
We want to rescue them without even knowing them, without even being willing to break bread. And I think that was one of the things that made Christ's ministry stand out.
Right.
Because he was willing to break bread with a prostitute,
Yeah.
a woman by the well, even the undesirables.
Yeah.
He was still willing to break bread and share fellowship.
Yeah, it's kind of that's always kind of been my thought is, I like going to Sunday morning service just as much as the next person, but it's kind of like, am I a Christian just because I go to Sunday morning service and Wednesday night service, or what am I really doing during the week? Like, where am I going? Where am I spending my time? What is my support system around me? Who am I actually ministering to? And what are my motivations in my heart behind what I do and why I do it?
And where your life is making a difference.
Right.
That's refreshing. Well, look, I'm excited having you on board. I want
I'm
you to know
excited
that.
too. Yeah.
And even during these past 7 months, doing ministry has been awkward with COVID-19. But even in our meetings, as we discuss different ministry decisions, your input has been extremely important. I hope you feel that.
Yeah, thank you.
Our leaders have surely appreciated your candidness.
Yeah.
And you're willing to get into the mud and break bread.
Yes, sir.
So we're excited about that. So I know that in the future we're going to be doing short slots.
Yeah.
So the next one we do, that's going to, so you want to talk about the pillars of Urban Reach?
Yeah.
So at least our listeners know that the next clip is going to be focusing on the discovery part.
Yeah. So with Urban Reach, we want to help anybody and everybody that wants to be helped and whoever reaches out to us. But we kind of have a model for that, and our model is discover, disciple, deploy.
Discover, disciple, deploy.
Discover, disciple, deploy.
So we want to help folks discover what?
We want to help them discover their passion for helping a diverse urban community.
And their unique calling in the kingdom.
Yeah.
So we'll help them to discover, and then
and then be discipled in that. If so,
disciple them
want,
in urban ministry.
Yeah, so we want you to, like, if you're just sitting in your church and you're like, man, what can I do? We want to help you, and we want to empower you to discover your gifting, to discover that skill set, and then we want to help you be discipled in that.
To discipled in it, and then to be
and
deployed.
then deployed in that.
It's again one of the things someone asked. What are some of the things that? Because I think even with COVID-19, there's some important takeaways.
Yeah.
At least for me, because in COVID-19 the church door closed.
Yeah.
So that means if the only means of ministry was in the church building, that was closed.
Right.
So I think out of that, I recognize that it really shifted ministry. So that means instead of coming to the building to listen to one person, every member, the laity, can now be released.
Right.
So you could be in your living room, set your camera on Facebook,
Right.
press Facebook Live, and you could speak to the world.
Yeah.
So COVID-19, I believe, could help us to discover our calling. But we could also, out of the context of COVID-19, also determine the scope.
Yeah.
So we can have a local impact, but on the social platform, we can literally have a global impact. And I think it is important for us to recognize here's an opportunity for you to discover your spiritual significance. You don't need a title. You don't need to be known as a bishop or an evangelist to have something to offer to the kingdom. You just have to know Jesus Christ as your personal Lord and Savior. And Kyle is here. We are excited about the prospect that God has placed before us. And we believe that Urban Reach will literally change the landscape of ministry in New York City. So thank you, Kyle, for this taking the time so we could
we'll do it
chat.
again.
I definitely look forward to that. And we're excited, man. I'm excited about the future.
All right, man.
All right?
All right.
Love you, man. God